Good morning, everyone. My guest this morning is Joey Lee. Joey Lee is an ultra-creative talent that I met when he worked at our Dream Silkscreen printing shop that Jane Swift and I own. From there, he really soared in the advertising world, landing at a top agency in Jackson, Mississippi, where he met his future wife, Allison. Just a few years into their marriage, Allison was diagnosed with a malignant melanoma. For 2 years, the couple traveled the country seeking the best treatments, but heartbreakingly, Allison passed away. At such a young age in a marriage, how do you go on? Well, we'll ask Joey in the next few minutes. Well, Joey, on a lighter side, I wore this for you. Everybody, this is the original Dream Silkscreens t-shirt, and Joey was a big part of that. This is a 30-year-old t-shirt.
It doesn't seem like that long ago.
No, it doesn't. We did some crazy things. That was back in 1993. That was when Dream was actually between Billy Harriman's and remember Hundred Oaks Beauty Mart?
Yeah.
All the ladies there.
Yeah.
Now it's no longer there. If you go by there, I don't know if you've been by there,
I've been.
It's going to be a bake shop. So you're going to have people be baking cakes where your old art department
That's good to know because I like cake.
You would have loved it then. So tell us about, you were an LSU student and you just walked in one day with this terrific resume.
Yeah, I actually walked in to register for the reindeer run. And I just kind of said, I was looking for a job at the time, and I said, hey, y'all don't happen to need an artist, do you? And you said you were busy organizing the run because it was that night. And you were like, well, talk to us after the run. And I ended up running really well in that race, and y'all noticed me. And so you said, come talk to us Monday. So went and talked to you Monday morning, and Monday afternoon you called and offered me the job.
Everybody, that was a big point in his behalf that he ran so well with Reindeer Run. So it's like, this guy's cute, he can run, and boy, is he talented. So, we spent several great years together.
Yeah, those were probably three of the best years of my life with you and Jane.
We became family then, and we continue to be family, and we'll just talk about that. But then, a good opportunity came along. You graduated from LSU, because that's what you were there for, to work for a prestigious firm in Jackson, Mississippi, Godwin Group, I believe it is. And Joey is so creative, I can't even tell you. So it was their gain. So tell us a little bit about that big career advancement.
Well, I blame you and Jane for that. You treated me like family, made me feel so loved that I was not scared to spread my wings and fly. I hated leaving, but the opportunity was too good, and I moved up to Jackson in 1996 and worked at the Godwin Group in their public relations department for quite a while, and that's where I met Allison.
Well, and before we get too far ahead of ourselves, we hadn't even jumped back to that fabulous run that you did that got you hired at Dream Silkscreens. When did you start running?
Start at the beginning. My dad was one of the early adopters of the jogging craze in the early 70s. And
your dad is awesome.
And so when I was about 10 years old in 1978, I started running with him. And we lived in Athens, Greece, because he was in the Air Force. And so my first race was a 1.5 mile loop around the Air Force Base there. I won't say what my time was because it was pretty bad, but I still have the little finisher certificate from that race, and I was hooked from then on.
I think we have a picture that Brandon's going to put into the video of you and your dad in River Cities Triathlon.
Mm-hmm.
And you just did that Sunday. How many times have you done River Cities?
Well, my first one was in 1987. A buddy of mine the week before he had said, I'm doing this triathlon this weekend. You ought to come do it. And I said, triathlon, what's that? So he told me it was swim, bike, run. I borrowed a bike and did that race in 1987, and fell in love with that sport, and I've been doing it ever since. 38 years.
Literally done hundreds, if not thousands, of triathlons.
I've tried counting, but I haven't kept good records. I'm not a type A like that, so I don't know exactly, but it's well into the hundreds.
Me neither. People ask me all the time, how many marathons have you run? And honestly, Joe, I have no idea. One of these days I'll sit down and count them, but maybe I won't.
Exactly.
It's a lot. You know,
Yeah.
we get to the point where you can say, I have no idea.
Yeah.
You've done a lot,
Not a clue.
lot of work on the roads.
Yeah.
So you were always a runner and hugely creative and accomplished in advertising. So you're up in Jackson, Mississippi, and at this great firm, and you meet this cute, funny girl that becomes your friend.
Yeah, it was really funny because she worked at Godwin, and we got to be really good friends, and such good friends that everybody at Godwin thought we were dating. And we would say, no, we're just friends, we're friends. And then finally it morphed into dating, but nobody was asking anymore because they thought we were just really good friends. And I didn't even really know we were dating until a couple of months into the fact. And Allison kind of told me we're dating. I was like, oh, okay.
I did feel a little bit of a spark there.
Yeah.
Well, that's, and y'all got married. How long after that did you get married?
We dated for probably about a year, and we got married in 1999, fall of 99.
And, great marriage. I remember y'all came through town a bunch, and we continued to see each other. And, we loved Allison, but not long into the marriage, you got some news that no newlywed couple or no anybody wants to hear. And tell us about that.
Yeah. Allison came back from a business trip, and she said, Joey, will you feel under my arm? I think I feel a lump. And I felt, and there was a lump. And within days, we were in surgery. She was in surgery. She was in surgery and having her lymph nodes removed. The doctor came out and he said, I feel like I got all the cancer. He didn't. So the next 2 years were terrible and great at the same time.
What do you do when you come home that day and find out that your wife has got a melanoma? How was that day go?
Well, thankfully, Allison was super strong and a super positive person. The cup was not only half full, it was overflowing with her all the time. And so we got with her parents and we made a plan. We got on the phone to MD Anderson. We had appointments at MD Anderson within days. We were down there. So we didn't dwell on it. And it's kind of like I tell my daughter now, I'm like, worrying isn't going to do us any good. Let's figure out what we can do to take that worry away. And so we looked at the problem and we said, how do we solve this? How do we fix this? And we made a plan and we started working toward that plan.
On a day-to-day basis, I think about it a lot. How does a couple deal with that inside the marriage? I can see it going both ways with people unintentionally kind of emotionally drawing back because of the hurt that possibly is ahead, or doubling down on this love that you have for a person. And that may change from day to day and month to month.
We pretty much doubled down. We leaned on each other, and I wanted to take care of her, and she let me take care of her she understood that I was there for her, and so it worked out really well. We never clashed. We never. I can't even describe it. I took care of her and she let me.
Well, and so many people make that trek to Houston or to California on a regular basis. How does that affect your stability of your home life or your job? Did the agency? These are two people that are really essentially out of work.
Yeah, we were. Well, by that point, Allison had left Godwin, and she was at a tech company. So she just basically went on disability. Thankfully, Allison's parents, Tiger and Pat, were financially stable enough to help us out. But God wouldn't let me keep my job until 9/11, and that affected the entire advertising industry. And so I kept my job for most of the time. But we were able to go down to Houston, and her parents rented an apartment. I was in the hospital most of the time, but I would go work out at the apartment.
Yeah, does the stability of the household, you felt like it was kept in sync, or it just was a chronic, we're going here, we're going there, it's frustrating and depressing?
Again, we were working towards this plan, and so we had the house there in Jackson. We would go there once in a while, but most of the time we were either in Houston or California, and it was mostly Houston for the most part.
Yeah, that's got to be tough. And for 2 years, y'all fought it and did everything in clinical trials. And then what happens that day? Was there a single day when it was finally you looked each other in the eye and say, "This, all our prayers and all our efforts are not going to work"?
Unfortunately, we never talked about that.
How could you never talk about that? You talked about that in your own minds and other rooms?
We were always positive. Allison didn't want to think about the worst case. And we didn't want to put that in her mind any more than it already was. So we were always positive. We were always, when you get better, we're going to do this. When you get better, we're going to do that. Thanksgiving Day 2002, we had Thanksgiving dinner early in Jackson and flew to Houston. And we were, because she was going to have to start another round of treatment, but she had a seizure. So we ended up in the emergency room and ICU at MD Anderson. And I mean, she came out of that seizure somewhat, but we really never had a chance to talk about it. We ended up staying there until she was stable enough to bring her back to Jackson. We brought her home and had hospice care. And then on January 8th, she died. Unfortunately, I lived through it, and I remember a lot of it myself. And I remember the funeral and how absolutely lovely it was, and how her parents had just such a warm remembrance of her that it was fabulous. But when everybody went home, and Jane Swift and I went up there to the funeral, we got to walk around with you after, and it's after the funeral's over and, everybody's gone home, the reality sets in. And I think the reality was setting in with you. And you decided to take a different approach to just pure grieving. And tell everybody what you decided to do. Initially, I was, as you can imagine, I was just lost. I had thrown myself into training. I was training 2.5 hours before work. I was working all day. I was training 2 to 4 hours in the evenings, so that
just numbing yourself.
It was actually absolutely numbing myself. So that way I would get done training, take a shower, and pass out. So I wouldn't have any trouble sleeping. But it was just because I was self-medicating through endorphins. But I finally sat back and I said, I've got to have a goal. I've got to have a goal, and that's one of the things I try to recommend to people going through something like this is set a goal for yourself. And I had heard about this race and seen a couple of documentaries called the Marathon des Sables, and it was billed back then as the toughest foot race on the planet is how they build it. And I'm the kind of person where if you tell me I can't do something, that's the way to get me to do it. So anything that's the toughest on the planet was really attractive to me. And I started thinking about it, and I said to myself, well, what if I train for that and use it as a fundraiser for the American Cancer Society? And so I teamed up with a good friend of mine, Stacy, And she helped me a lot with the fundraising side of it, and I was able to concentrate on training for the most part. But what the Marathon des Sables is it's a 7-day, 150-mile foot race across the Sahara Desert, and you run it in stages, so each day is a different distance. But it's self-supported, so you carry all of your food, your sleeping bag, your snake bite kit, your first aid kit, flares in a backpack.
I remember when you told me, I said, oh my God, Joey is crazy, but I was also thinking, well, another kind of pain is better than the pain I'm going through, so.
Absolutely. The physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional pain.
I can appreciate that,
Yeah.
but it was still crazy.
Yeah, and
Great experience.
it was an incredible experience. We raised over $100,000 for the American Cancer Society.
Dang, Joe.
I wish we'd have had the crowdfunding sources back then that we have now. I feel like we could have raised $500,000 easy.
Oh, that's such a, 100,000 is incredible.
Yeah. But went over to Morocco and spent 7 days in the Sahara, 117 degree heat, carrying all my food on my back, and just had a incredible experience. And when I finished it, it was kind of like an awakening.
Some degree of healing.
Yeah. I did a lot of healing out in the desert.
That's incredible. And, you hate to say life moves on. I think that's the saddest thing that a person that loses somebody could hear, because, you don't really want it to move on without the person you've loved so much. But it did, and it's moved on wonderful for you. So tell us a little bit about that. One thing I do know is when Jane and I were with you at the funeral, when we were doing our walkabout, Jane said to you, Joey, if you ever need to come home, come home to dream, we're there for you. Not expecting it because you were so accomplished in Jackson, but then Jackson had a certain set of memories for you too. And, but you did, and it was for a good reason. Tell us about coming back home for a couple of years. Home is really not Baton Rouge, but I think it's home because you're my boy.
I consider it home. Jackson had lost its luster, so to speak, and so I called you and Jane, and I was like, I need to come home for a little while, and y'all welcomed me with open arms, and so I jumped at it, came home.
You did. And you were getting your master's, so on the upside of that, that touching, it's touching to me because, we've loved you all these years.
Yeah, got a master's in mass communication.
Yeah. Well, and you went on, your story ends just so beautifully, which is, kind of one of the neat things about this podcast, that there's so many people that have gone through these huge tragedies to come out just in such a bright light. And tell us about meeting Casey Burns, your wife right now, and having just the most adorable, fun daughter, Ginger.
Sure.
And Ginger's named after Ginger on Gilligan's Island, am I right?
She is.
This is Joey for you.
She is. She loves that.
I would too.
So, triathlon has helped me so much in my life. It gave me my new wife. We were in a training group, and we were on a group swim, and typically I was by myself on group swims, and I came up to breathe, and I saw something over here, and it scared the crap out of me because I thought it was an alligator. We were swimming in a lake, and then I looked again, and it was a person, and it was when we got out of the water, it was Casey, and she'd been in the training group. I hadn't known her, but that was the first time I really noticed her. And within a few weeks, she looked at me one day and she said, "I'm going to marry you." And I just said, "Yeah, right." I love that. I said, "Yeah, right." And 3 years later, we were married.
She's such a wonderful person.
Yeah, she's. It takes a special person to marry somebody with a background like what I went through, and she puts up with so much, and she's an amazing woman. Mm-hmm. To deal with that and to understand that there's a capacity to love Allison while at the same time loving her.
And I think that's a big message for people that lose a spouse.
Yeah, you never. People say, "Oh, you get over it," and the hurt passes. That's not the case for me. I guess I'm over it, but I'm not over it. But I have this love for Allison that will never go away. But I also have a love for Casey that will never go away. And there's room for both of them in my heart. And
it's a big heart.
And I never thought that would be the case. But I've found that to be true.
And you've had a child?
Yeah, we.
Ginger from Gilligan's Island.
Ginger from Gilligan's Island. How that happened is we were calling the baby Gilligan as a placeholder, and then when we found out it was a girl, I said, "I guess it's not Gilligan. I guess it's Ginger." And then we kept,
Mary Ann.
Yeah, and we kept using Ginger as a placeholder, and then finally, right before she was born, we were like, "This baby's name's Ginger." But again, to show what an incredible woman Casey is, she was all about naming her after Allison, so it was Ginger Allison Lee. And she's an incredible kid. She spent the first year of her life in a baby jogger as I was training for Boston. She's 6 months old and I'm doing 22-mile runs with her in the baby jogger. So she knows nothing different than getting up early on a Saturday or Sunday morning, going for a training run or going to a race. She started doing triathlons when she was about 6 years old, and she's done countless kids triathlons, and a few years ago she started doing some shorter adult sprints, and so we're trying to raise her right.
Kind of full circle, like you and your dad way back when.
Exactly. She's been running with me since she could walk, and we did little half-mile runs and just trying to get her into this and love it as much as her mom and I do, and as much as my dad does. He's still, my dad's 86 and he's still walking 2 or 3 miles every other morning.
Wouldn't expect anything different.
Yeah, he's doing great.
And y'all travel the world with seeing rock concerts.
We do.
What do you call it? Metalhead? Not really.
Headbangers.
Headbangers.
Okay. Yeah,
so Ginger's a headbanger now too.
We're trying to turn her, and she's got a good appreciation for 80s metal. We recently, last July, we went to London and took her to see AC/DC in London at Wembley Stadium.
I think Brandon has a picture that he's going to include in the video of that one too.
Yeah, that was a good trip. But she's, we travel a lot. She's been to 47 states, 16 countries, 2 continents. Yeah.
Y'all are doing it right.
Yeah.
That's so great. So, Joey, I thank you so much for being here. It means a lot. Everybody, Joey came here from Jackson, Mississippi. So, he drove in this morning. It's 9 o'clock on a Wednesday morning, and Joey's here and driving back. So I can't thank you enough for being here, because I know what you've gone through is going to mean a lot to a lot of people. And I know some people in my heart right now that are waiting to hear from you and want to hear from you. So thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
And now you're going to put up with my running shorts,
Sure.
life lessons. But you may have been around for this one. But this is an interesting one. It shows where you can have bad patches on some of the greatest race opportunities of your life. And so back when I was competing a good bit, I was kind of new to being pretty good at it, and I was competing in a prize money race in Florida. And I was not one of the top billed people, and so the really stud girls went out a little fast. This was a race where there was uphill at 2, so they went out a little bit, spicy, as I would say, and that's just not me. I'd rather run from behind. So, but I knew there was a hill at 2 miles, and it was a really hot day, and so I let them go on. So oddly, it was to their disadvantage, and by about 4 miles, I passed them, so I got to make a move on these girls. So I made a really good move on them, and I get half mile later, it's like, oh my God, what have I done? It's so hot. I may be stepping out of my class doing this. This was not a good thing. And it was just so tough. I'm start thinking, and you've probably gone through this too, those days when you think, what happens if I step off this course? It's not going to be the worst thing that happened. But weird to have those bad patches when you're in the best race of your life. And so I get on, I push through it, and I get to about 6 miles, and there's a downhill. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm proud of myself. I pushed through it. And then there's Margaret Thomas right on my shoulder. I mean, she is one of my nemesis. She went on to make an Olympic team, but she was right there. It's like, oh my God, I hadn't worked this hard to let Margaret kill me in this. So anyway, the story was I pushed and, ended up setting a PR and winning the race. But looking back on that, it's just so crazy that I was going to drop out of the best race of my life. And so I think the life lesson on the run is that everybody, including Joey Lee, has bad patches. Sometimes it's hard to push through them, but you push through them, and maybe you learn that the best is yet to come. And in my case, a big win at that race and a PR. So we can learn a lot on the run.
Yeah, we absolutely can. You just got to keep going.
Keep going. Bad patches will happen. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Joey.
Thanks.